I grabbed a case with tab bar from the Sleepiest application which we developed for a client. There are 5 sections in tab bar that have active and inactive statuses. Bodymovin does better conversions of vector than raster. For our demo, I'll take any 3 icons and make a JSON animation as an example. If the original icon file is in Figma, Sketch, or Adobe XD, then you'll first have to prep it just right. I recommend using a monotone color filler for importing images into After Effects. If you need a gradient, just adjust it later in After Effects. I'm removing layers with opacity on the icons. I select all 3 icons and change the format for export to SVG. Let's download the SVG files to Adobe Illustrator. As you can see, the icon turned out way too small, and it will be inconvenient to animate shapes with that kind of resolution. Let's increase the icon by 100 pixels in width and adjust the artboard to the icon size. I have 4 vector objects in one layer. To ensure that After Effects reads them all as individual shapes, we need to place each object onto its own separate layer. So I'll select all the objects, open up the Layer menu, and select Release to Layers Sequence. And I'll delete the last empty layer. I'm organizing the layer hierarchy I need and renaming it so that I don't get mixed up at the animation stage. Let's save the file in Illustrator format. Now let's repeat the process for the other 2 icons. Now's a good time to emphasize that it's best to work only with vectors and not mess around with masks, effects, and raster images. Let's open Adobe After Effects. If you transfer all the files with the drag and drop method, they'll just be reorganized as regular PNG images, so it's essential to import the files one after the other individually. After Effects recognizes Illustrator files as regular images by default. To make sure everything appears in layers, don't forget to select Composition in the Import line. I'm opening the first composition. Everything is where it's supposed to be, but After Effects rasterized all the layers. I'm highlighting all 4 layers, right-clicking, and selecting Create Shapes from the vector layer. By default, After Effects created a composition lasting 2 seconds. I'll increase the duration to 6 seconds. Now I'm checking all the icon statuses in Figma and copying the background color into Tab Bar. My icon is active now, and I'll begin making the animation from active to inactive. Let's start with the surroundings. I'm linking the keyframe to the position parameter. I'm changing the X parameter at frame 0. Let's see. To ensure our animation flows smoothly, let's adjust keyframes. I'll select Keyframes, then go to Keyframe Assistant and select Easy Ease. Let's take a look. Everything works. Now I'm making an animation to switch the icon back. The animation ends too abruptly. I'll have to lengthen the timeline of all the layers and get a looped animation. Our last move will be to change the illustration color to inactive status. First, let's change the color of the background elements with the fill effect. Typically, Lottie doesn't support effects from After Effects, but there's a short list of about 10 items which are okay to use. Fill effect is one of those few. Now I'm animating keyframes in the same places. Gray color at frame 0, and after 15 frames, I'll add the blue color we want. Let's check it out. I'm copying keyframes in reverse so we get a fade effect at the end of the animation. Now let's repeat the same thing for the sliders. I'm copying the fill effect with the exposed keyframes and just changing up the colors. The first animation is all set. We can tackle the next one. I'm opening a composition named Land, consisting of 3 layers. I'm repeating all the preparatory steps that I took in the first composition. Throughout the animation, this icon's hills will be moving apart on the sides, and the lower strip will get wider. Let's get this animation started. I'll apply the same position parameter. For the hill objects, I add keyframes to the 15th frame, just like I did the first time around. I'm also arranging the elements how I want them at the 0 frame. I intend to apply the scale parameter along the x-axis for the lower strip, but that will deform the strip's rounding when we change sizes. Instead, I'll use the path parameter. I'm adding a keyframe to the 15th frame. At the 0 frame, we highlight the element's anchor points one by one on all sides and offset to the distance I want. Now we check what we've got. Everything looks good and there's no deformation. I'm selecting the keyframes to easy ease them. Now we reverse keyframes to play the animation backwards while making sure the timing lines up with the previous animation. I'm just duplicating what I did before, but in the opposite direction. I'm applying the same manipulation with the fill effect, starting with the first layer. In Figma, I'm checking the original inactive status colors, and at the 15 frame mark, I add a keyframe to change the color to blue-green. Reversing keyframes. The colors are running together. Let's add some transparency to the remaining layers and make the transition animation from 80% to 100% from the 0 to 15 frames. Now let's take a look and compare it with what we had in Figma. All looks good. Time to animate the third icon. Here, I'll demonstrate some new tricks that are also really important when working with animations. The third icon is a silhouette of a koala character. I've already thought about how we'll animate it, but first I need to adjust the interaction between layers. For example, the inner gray layer has to always move in sync with the outer one. That relates to both ears. I'm parenting the inner gray layer with the ear out layer. I'll link the ears and nose with the head layer, so that any head movement changes the location of all the parts. Let's start with animating the ears. Our layer is just a regular circle, and to make ear movement look a bit more natural, we'll have to make a condition connecting the ears to the head. With the Y tool, I transfer the center of the layer to the conditional point of intersection with the head. I set the guides, which will help me mirror this with the left ear. Now I select the left ear layer and with the same Y tool, set the center where the rules intersect. Let's select the rotation parameter with the R key for ear rotation. I set keyframes to 0 and 15. In the middle, we'll set the rotation angle, something like 18 degrees for the right ear, and in the opposite direction, negative 18 degrees for the left ear. Checking it now. I'm duplicating the resulting keyframes for both layers. I'm moving on to the nose. For the sake of keeping things realistic, we can deform the rounding of the element just a bit. So let's shift the center of the layer up and animate with a regular scale along the Y-axis. Now I'm applying colors from Figma. Now we recolor the inner ears. The animation is complete. I'll make all the compositions into squares, 120 pixels by 120 pixels. It's a good idea to check in with the design, so I'm unloading my reference from Figma. I'll create a new composition with the layer size and transfer the animations. Now let's adjust according to size. After all the icons are where they should be, I'll return to Figma, remove the unnecessary illustrations, and replace the file that I prepared for the background. To make sure that the layers don't disappear and don't depend on the composition's duration, I'm adding time remapping to them. Now I can extend the composition and place them one after the other, creating the effect of switching tabs. The animation is ready. Let's go on to the final stage, rendering the JSON file. We'll switch on our secret weapon, the Bodymovin library, which is under the tab window, Extensions, Bodymovin. The library shows all the compositions we have in the project. I click the three buttons and indicate where we want to save the file. I'll repeat this for each of our three animations. It's best to rename future files right away. We'll select only those compositions we want to convert on the left and click the render button. The conversion itself takes just seconds. The JSON file appears in the folder with the animation code. All we have to do is look them over. Recently, Lottie released a plugin for Figma that lets you play and export JSON animations. Let's remove anything we don't need from the project. Right-click Plugins, Lottie Files. We indicate the file path and upload. The animation starts, and that means that our JSON code worked out well and is all set to be handed over to the developers. Bye, everybody.